I had an interesting experience on the drive over here tonight. So Tim Whitaker, you guys know, he's a member of the group. I haven't seen Tim in years. We used to work together. Actually, we worked together at two places, right? So I'm driving over here and I get a text on my phone. It's like, I think I'm behind you. And I look back and sure enough, it's Tim. Haha. He recognized me by the silhouette of my hair in the car, which I thought was hilarious.
That happens to me all the time.
Indeed. So hey, how y'all doing? I'm pretty good. I've been better, but I've been worse. So it's a kind of a grab bag today. So tonight we're going to be talking about some PowerShell stuff. How many of you guys use PowerShell already? I know Alan and everybody else. So, how many of you guys are afraid of PowerShell? Yeah, that's what I figured. So what we can do tonight, since you guys kind of gave me a lot of time, which is good, I can sort of walk you through the basics of becoming comfortable with it. Is one of the things that I like to do. I don't like to, like, you're going to watch me use it and you're going to be like, oh, wow, I have no idea what to do now. But what I can do is just show you sort of very, very simple tools that you can use to become comfortable with it. I mean, literally, like, you know, people get up here to give demos and they've prepped them. Like, that's typically what happens, right? You know, people come here and they've prepped demos and stuff. Like, all I did was I made sure my server was running before I came here, and I'm going to walk up to this thing. I have no idea what I'm going to do, and that's how I run my demos, and that's how you sort of use PowerShell. You just sort of walk up to it and ask it questions like, what can you do for me today? So I'll show you what I mean. So a little bit about me. My name is Jim Christopher. I am a local guy. I'm here from Charlotte. I've lived here since 2000, I believe. And I run a small software shop called Code Owls LLC. It's a great shop, actually, really smart people. Stop laughing. Super smart, smartest group of people I've ever worked with. No offense, Tim. They're also very handsome. But actually, okay, so everybody except my boss. I really hate my boss. Don't tell him I said that, obviously, if you see him. So, but I've been working there for 5 years now. I've been Employee of the Year every year, and it's been great. It's great. I work for myself. I don't know if I mentioned that to you, but you can figure that out. Anyway, if you have questions about what you're seeing tonight, you can reach out to me in one of the following ways. If you want my attention really, really fast, Twitter's the easiest way. Beefarino on Twitter. It's a long story how I got the name. So that's what I do this month, right? And then I actually wrote myself a resignation letter. I'm resigning my position. I'm keeping the company open, but I've taken a full-time job with a company called Pluralsight. Anybody familiar with Pluralsight? Yeah. So they brought me on as curriculum director, which is great. It's a really great opportunity for me. I'll be able to drive a lot of their enterprise and IT content. So I'm very happy about that. And what else do I have to tell you about? Oh, this, right? So I'm a PowerShell MVP, which is odd. So I'm a PowerShell MVP, and I'm a software developer. So I have a server MVP, and I'm a software developer, and I don't really do IT stuff. So how does that happen? Well, I do a lot of technology integration, and I use PowerShell to do it. So I've published about a dozen or so open source projects. Some of them are really cool. Some of them are really useless. But that's why I got the MVP, I think. So anyway, last year, Manning approached us, a bunch of us, and said, hey, can you guys donate your time and write chapters for a book? And we won't pay you. But instead, we'll donate our resources to get the book published, and any proceeds we make beyond the cost of making the book, we'll donate to charity. So we did it. It was great. It's PowerShell deep dives, and it's got stuff in there, everything from, and these are deep dive topics. This isn't like, how do you go use PowerShell, right? This is like, I need to know how to use WMI in a farm environment, right? And so things like that. But the chapters are really deep. They're really intense. And the chapter about software automation is just really awesome, I have to say. It's whoever wrote that is obviously very handsome. But anyway, so like all the proceeds for this book go to charity. They go to a charity called Save the Children, and I think their exact excuse me, their exact mission is something to the effect of making sure that children all over the world have the health and physical resources they need to have a successful life, a productive life. Excuse me. So if you like children, go buy the book. If you don't like children, which honestly, if you don't buy the book, it kind of seems like you do. You don't like children if you don't buy the book, then by all means don't buy the book. Actually, I brought one. I'm going to give one away. So you can feel good about yourself if you win the book. The rest of you should feel bad. And I also brought another one. This one, and actually I wanted to bring this up now. If you are learning PowerShell, get this book. It's called the Powershell Cookbook. It's by a guy named Lee Holmes, and he's on the PowerShell team. Again, he himself donates all the money that he makes off of this book to some charities that he thinks are important. I don't know what they are. But if you're learning PowerShell, I use that book every day, and I'm a PowerShell MVP. It's very helpful. It's very task-oriented, very friendly. So more resources for you if you're interested. I run the local PowerShell user group. And we meet the first Thursday of every month at the Microsoft campus down off of Arrowwood. This isn't your usual user group in the sense that you don't have, these guys who think they know a lot come into your group and flapping their gums for 2 hours trying to teach you stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that, okay? But what we do typically is we play games. I'll come up with a scripting scenario, and everybody comes in and you can work in teams and try to figure it out. Other times you can bring in the work that you're doing, and we'll try to help you get it done. So it's a very active. You leave the night having done stuff, right? You don't just sit there and listen like you're going to do tonight. You actually leave there with new scripts and new tools that you can take to your job the next day. So it's a very useful group. But sign up. You'll get the notifications. And as soon as you join the group, you can actually schedule your own meetup. So if you're in, Davidson and you're trying to get help with something and you want to take someone to lunch and get some help, you can schedule your own meetup and have people show up to help you. It's actually very useful. All right. All right, so let's get on to the topic at hand. All right, so I'm going to talk about PowerShell, specifically remoting access. And there's two different technologies that I'm going to talk about today. There's PowerShell remoting, which is sort of the basis of the rest of the technology. And then we're going to talk about PowerShell Web Access, which is sort of the next step beyond remoting. So before I dig in, actually, how many of you would just like to kind of see what PowerShell looks like and how to use it? And don't be shy. Thank you. All right. Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to see. All right. All right. Oops. It's pretty, isn't it? Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. All right. Oops. How does that read for you guys? Can you guys see that okay? Everybody see that okay? All right. All right, so first things first. I use this every day. Okay, so, and it's also really weird. Anybody who uses this kind of stuff every day is going to tell you that the syntax is just odd. So if you see me doing something and you don't understand it, raise your hand. And if I don't see you raise your hand, shout at me. Okay, but bottom line, don't let me do something up here that you don't understand. All right, because you'll go away. Your brain will shut off. And you're like, okay, I can't process this anymore. But it's actually like it's dirt simple stuff. As soon as you know what you're doing. So that's the first thing that everyone says. It's a DOS prompt, right? And initially, that's kind of, I let you have that reaction, right? I'm allowing you to have that reaction. Like, people will tell you, well, it's DOS on steroids, right? The name of the technology is PowerShell, right? And the idea is that that Windows finally has an interactive shell the way that Linux has always had, right? Linux has had Bash and C shell since the inception, right? In fact, that's all you had when you first started. And Windows never had that. They had the DOS prompt, which was really crippled. It was very difficult to sort of get programs to work together effectively. But now we have this shell. And so, yeah, so it's very much, it feels like a DOS environment. The commands that you already know, like dir, what does dir do? It returns a list of stuff, right? A list of stuff in the directory. And CLS, right, which I just typed. I sort of typed that automatically. But CLS does what? Clear the screen, right? These are all DOS commands that you know and love. You love them, right? So anybody use Linux on a regular basis in here? Anybody's bat? Yeah, I know Tim does. All right. So what does that command do? ls. Yeah, it's the Linux version of dir, right? So you have DOS commands that work in this environment. You have Linux commands that work in this environment. So Microsoft has tried to sort of level the playing field and say, if you're comfortable working in Bash, if you're comfortable working in DOS, if you're comfortable working in Windows, come use this shell, and the knowledge that you have already gained will transfer over for the most part. And that's not necessarily always true. There's like every once in a while I'll find myself typing something like kill, which doesn't exist in PowerShell, but it exists on Linux. So, but again, the idea is that it's trying to make you comfortable in this new environment, right? So let's do a task-oriented thing, all right? And hopefully. Yeah, I think I have the scenario. I think I can do this. So your boss comes to you and says, hey, go to the server and pull up the console, right? And let's say it's Windows Server 2012 Core. What's magical about 2012 Core? Anybody know? Yeah, what?
Command line output.
Yeah. So there's no GUI. There's nothing to click. The only thing you have is this, right? Is this prompt. So you're going to boot it up, and that's going to be staring you in the face. Right? So your boss comes to you and says, okay, go to that server that's running core, and I want you to tell me if the web service is running, the World Wide Web publishing service is running. All right? So what do you do? I'm literally, and I'm not being rhetorical. Like when I ask questions, I'm like, usually, if it's rhetorical, I'll answer it right away. If it's not, I'll stand here and look puzzled. So, like, what would you do if you had to do this, and this is what you're presented with? What's the first thing you would do? Yeah. You would ping the website. All right. So you would type ping. So if you want to see if the web service is running, there's other reasons the website could be unavailable, though, right? So if the network's down, let's say, the web service could be running, but the website's down. So our task is to find the web service, right? Where is the web service running? Any other ideas? So who doesn't know what to do in this situation? Yeah. And what's the first thing you do when you don't know what to do? You ask for help. Yeah. So here we are. Excuse me. My brother's reaching out to me. There we go. Yeah, so the first thing you want to do is ask for help, right? And this is probably my favorite feature of PowerShell. I got to be honest with you. If I type help in PowerShell, I get back just gobs and gobs of stuff, right? So I just type the word help and I hit enter. And this is everything that it returned, right? So right now, and this is actually, it's a weird topic for it to return, but what I want to point out is that I'm getting back things like short descriptions, long descriptions. Whoops. Okay, let's try that again. I broke my shell. There it goes. All right. All right. So the point being, there's a ream of information here that's flowing past that you can go back and look at. Includes live examples that you can run. It includes, if you go down the bottom, other things that you might want to look at. Like down here, see also these other help topics, right? So I said what was our task? We had to check if a service was running, is that right? Check if the W3 SVC service is running. So we know about Git help. Let's ask it what kind of help it can provide about services, right? So I can type help, that's what I typed before. That's actually a shorter version of the command, and I want to start using the canonical versions now. I'm going to type get-help. And you're going to see this is a pattern in PowerShell. You have a verb and a dash and then a noun. And they're not always verbs, like new is one of them, and new is not a verb. But like getting and setting and invoking and saving and loading and publishing and those kinds of things. It's to help you remember what these commands do. So when I say get help, I'm saying, hey, give me some help, right? Get the help, and I want to know everything you know about a service, right? So in this case, I've got those asterisks, which in the old DOS days we called them what? Wildcards or globs. Sometimes they would refer to them as globs. So show me whatever you know about services. And you saw that little pop-up. It came up and said, oh, let me search help for you and figure out what I know about services. And what it's returning is a list of topics. Right? So if you look at this, I've got, looks like it's got a set of commands here. And so you got a name, a category, and then some other stuff here. But we have the names like get-service. And based on what I just told you about the commands, what do you think that does? Gets the service, yeah. It gets the service. You literally, it does exactly what it says, right? New service. What do you think that does? Speak up. I can't hear you guys. Yeah, it installs a new service. Sets up a new service on the machine. Right, and there's tons of stuff here. I mean, all the way down to some of this more esoteric stuff like add AD computer service account. I don't know what that does. I'm not an Active Directory guy, but I'm sure it does something really awesome. All right, so get help is sort of this first entry point. This is where you come to say, how do I do this, right? Or more to the point, like, what can I do? Or how do I do this thing? How do I do this thing? How do I find the commands that I need to execute this task that I need to get done for my boss? So we found this command, get-service, right? And let's see what we can find out about it. So I'm going to type get help and then the name of the command, get service. And as soon as I run that, I get back, again, this nicely formatted help topic here. You get a synopsis of what it does and some syntax information about what the command's going to look like. Which, by the way, not to be rude, but I ate right before this, and so this whole talk is going to be me trying not to burp in the microphone. So you get the synopsis, the syntax, the description, and again, some related links if that wasn't quite what you were looking for. Maybe you wanted to look at something else. So that tells us what get service does, right? And it sort of confirms our suspicions. It gets the services on the local computer. One other thing I want to show you about get help, if you pass this -full parameter, you actually get back a ton more stuff. So that first part was sort of the truncated help, and if you look at this, we get not only the syntax information that we got before, but we're also getting parameter information, what all the parameters are, what they do, how they're used, and then my favorite part, you actually get live examples, right? So this one has, I think, 11 examples in it. Everything from the basic usage, like if I type get service, what's going to happen, down to sort of the more complex things down here, like what happens if I type that. So this is a great resource, right? The help is built in. You don't have to leave your machine to go get it. It's once you install PowerShell and install the help, it's just there. You don't have to go to MSDN. You don't have to ask your neighbor. It's just there. All right, so we have this command, get service, right? Let me show you another way we could have found that. So the first command I want you to remember is get help. Right? So walk out of here knowing that command exists. Right? What's the name of that command? Get help. Thank you. All right. So we've got help on get service. The second command I'm going to show you that I want you to remember is called get command. Right? What do you think this does? Gets the commands that are available in your system. So if I hit enter here, it's going to go on and on. There's tons of them, right? All sorts of weird stuff, like everything from update Azure VM to working with Active Directory. And I think I have the Exchange module installed in here. So there's all sorts of stuff I can manage through PowerShell on this machine. I can also come in here and do the same thing I did with help. So tell me what you know. What can I do with services? Can you guys see that? Yeah. So what can I do with services? Tell me what commands you have that look like they have something to do with the service. And it'll come back and give me the truncated list. Right? So again, a lot of this stuff we saw before. But it's talking about how setting up Azure services. There's get service again. So again, this is a really good way that you can try to narrow down the options, right? So instead of having, I think there's like 2,400 built-in commands now that ship with PowerShell 4. You really just want to know a subset of those. And so this is how you kind of whittle away the cruft that you're not looking for. Right? So git help, what can I do? Git command, how am I going to do it? So we were playing with services, right? And our command was git service, right? So let's see what happens if I type git service. So if I hit enter and type a git service, I get back what looks like. Yeah, what is this? I heard someone say it. What is this? It's a list of services that are running on my machine, right? I'm sorry? Yeah, so it's a list of the services by name, the current status, whether they're running or not, and then the display name, which is usually a little bit more readable than the service name. What's the name of the? Oh, there it is. So if I had to go to my boss and say, well, is the W3C service, is the web service running on that server? I can come into this list and say, yep, there it is. The W3 SVC service, the World Wide Web Publishing Service, is in fact running on that server, so it must be a network problem. The reason we can't get to that website. So then he comes back and says, well, let's try restarting the service, right? And so again, this is a non-rhetorical exercise. What do you do? Right? How do you do that here? That's a good guess, right? So as I heard restart service, how would you check if there was a restart service command? Git command, restart dash service. Yeah, it exists. That works. So let's see. In fact, I don't even remember how this works. So restart service. And again, this is a short way to get to the short version of help. If you just do the dash question mark, that's like asking for help for that command. All right, so it comes back and it says, yep, this in fact does stops and starts one or more services, and it's expecting, looks like one of the syntax expects some kind of name right there. So restart service, I have to provide it with some kind of name. Get service, W3 star. Right. You notice I can apply these wildcards to command names, and then when I go to actually use a command, very often I can actually apply the wildcards there as well. So I just literally said, give me all the services that start with W3, and then something, right? So W3 star, show me all of those. So that limits the list again to just the things that I need to see. And there's W3 SVC, so I can say restart service W3 SVC, right? I can't start because I am not an administrator right now, because I am bad at planning ahead. All right, let's see if this works. Let's say restart service. Nope. Cannot open the service. I don't know why that's happening. Must have broke the service somehow. Can you type sudo? No, so it's not. I don't think it's that I'm unelevated. We can actually try this again. So, like I said, I don't script these things out. Oh, there you go. That looks promising. Is it control click on the taskbar that runs it elevated? Okay. Oh yeah, now it says I'm an administrator, so hopefully this will work. Yay, Jim, figured it out. All right, so that's it, right? So git help, git command, git help. What do I do? Git command, how do I do it? And it's like, I mean, you see me up here, you see me like munging through this stuff, but this is what it's like, right? When you're working with a shell, this is what you're doing. You're almost having a conversation with the system. You're not planning out a solution and then implementing it and then moving ahead and pushing it out. You're kind of walking up to the system going, I don't know what I'm going to do with you yet. Let's figure it out together, right? And once you figure it out, you can actually save the solution. So like, for example, by the way, this is a program called the ISE. Has anyone seen this before? It's called the Integrated Scripting Environment. So this ships with, I think, PowerShell 2 and above. It's a graphical environment for the shell. I typically don't use it, so you'll see me muddle with it. I typically use just the console. But I use it here because I can manipulate the font easily and make it really big for you guys to see. But it's really great for editing these kinds of scripts. So if my boss comes back and says, okay, we got to do that every hour, set up a scheduled task, right? By the way, don't do that. If you have a server problem that requires you restarting the web service every hour, figure out what the problem is. Don't do this. But so you can come in here and you can say, okay, well, the command there was restart service, and we said W3 SVC, right? So I can type that into a file and save it. I'm going to go ahead and save this to my desktop. All right, I'm going to call it myjob.ps1. All right, so PS1 is sort of the default PowerShell file extension. All right. So something important that I want to point out to you, if I can get to my desktop. So there's myjob.ps1. If I double-click this, what do you think is going to happen? Yeah, so it's already open. Hold on. Let me close this again. All right, so if I double-click this, it actually opens it up for editing. It doesn't run it. And again, that was a decision they made after all the kerfuffle with Windows script. Remember VB script files, JScript files, how you could double-click them and they would run, or someone could send them to you as an attachment, and then if you open the attachment, they would just run. They didn't want that to happen anymore. So now, if you want to run one of these, you actually have to go into the shell and do it manually. So you would open up an environment like this, and you would actually type in the full path to the file, which in this case, it's on the desktop, so I can just type myjob.ps1. But you'll notice I've got the leading dot there, and which means what in path lingo? Yeah, the current location, wherever you are right now, which right here is C users Gym desktop. So I'm saying wherever I am right now, find myjob.ps1 and invoke it. It's not doing it because I'm not running as an administrator because I don't learn. I just don't learn things. I don't know what my problem is. All right, so what was the first command I wanted you to remember? Thanks. What was the second one? Mm-hmm. Very good. There's one more that I want you to learn. And so, by the way, we call these the discovery commandlets. Get help, get command, and this other one that I'm going to show you now, because we use them all the time to find all the other commands that are available inside of PowerShell. So, I don't remember how to do things, right? Obviously, right? I've proven that already several times tonight. But I can remember how to figure things out. So this is, again, when you see someone hacking in the shell, this is what they're doing. Get help, how do I do it? Get command, how am I going to do it? And then this last one. All right, so up until this point, when I run Git service, we got back this text back, or we got back this text that displayed in the console that shows the status of all the services, right? This is a little bit misleading. So the text is actually just formatting, right? It's just sort of icing. What actually happens when I run Git service is that PowerShell creates a list of objects. Right? And again, it's kind of a weird term. It means something to developers. Doesn't always mean something to IT pros. What it's returning is a very big, wide, feature-rich thing that you can interact with. And what happens with that thing is it gets formatted and displayed on the screen. And I'm going to prove it to you. Right? So I'm going to type git service. And I'm going to run it a special way. So I'm going to use this up and down character, this vertical thing that looks like a wall. What do we call that? Height. Yes, thank you. Can anyone explain what it does? Yeah, so you think of a pipe as having an opening on each end, right? And that's kind of what's happening here. So I'm saying git service, and then I'm piping it to something else. I'm saying git service, take whatever comes out of that command, and send it down the pipe to whoever's next in line. So I'm saying git service, and I want to pipe that to this third command that I want you to remember, which is called git member. Right. And again, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but git service returns a list of services. Right. That's what happens. And then the pipe says take that output, take the output from git service, and now it's going to become input to the next command in this pipeline, which is git member. When I run that, I get a different set of output. But what I want to point out is that what this is saying is I get the list of services and then tell me, get the list of services and then tell me what those things have. What can I do with those service objects that I'm getting back from the shell? And in fact, it's giving you back a bunch of information. It's saying, okay, well, each of these services is actually a type of system.serviceProcess.serviceController, and unless you're a .NET developer, that's not going to mean anything to you. In a nutshell, that's the same type. If I want to operate in C# or Visual Basic, and I want to interact with Windows services, that's the type that I use. It's literally the same exact thing. So you can go to the shell and interact with the same programming objects that developers have to use Visual Studio to get into, right? So it's telling me that's what the type is. These are all the methods that it supports, things like execute command or refresh or start, stop. And it also supports a set of properties. So it's literally telling me what this thing is and what I can do with it. So if you've never seen this before, this can be kind of difficult to grok right away. Like, what does this mean? What I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a variable. $S. Dollar means variable in PowerShell. I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to assign S to get service, and I want the web service, the web publishing service. Right? And now I have this $S, and I can actually reference it on the shell, and I get back that object that I asked for, right? That service reference. And again, it just looks like that formatted list that we saw before. However, at this point, I can actually interact with this object as if I was programming with it, right? So I can say $S, and then I hit dot, and thank you, ISE. It's got this nice IntelliSense completion for me. It's telling me all the things that I can do with that object. And you'll notice there's a bunch of stuff on here that's not displayed in the formatted output. And that's usually the case, right? Usually PowerShell's picking 1 or 2 or 3 important things to show you, but there's like just a ream of useful information inside of these things that you have access to, but you have to sort of ask for it. So I'm going to see, am I allowed to stop that service? Is the service stoppable? Yes, it is, right? So I mean, but that's a very difficult concept to grasp inside of the shell, unless you're working with languages like Python or C# or a .NET language, let's say. But the power that gives, if that's where the word comes from, PowerShell, is the power that gives you is rather immense. So combining all those things, right? Those 3 discovery commands to figure out what it is you're going to do and how you're going to do it. That with pipelining and the variable access is those are kind of the big topics that you just sort of need to know as you're walking up to the shell to get stuff done. So a little bit more about pipelining and these objects. These pipelines can become arbitrarily complex, like just arbitrarily long. So I can say, okay, get the service, and I'm going to pipe that to something else. I'm going to pipe it to, I don't know, let's do select, we'll do a select object, right? So what do you think select object does? Yeah, it's like a filter, right? I want to select certain types of these objects. I'm going to say I want to select the last 15, right? And it shows me the last 15 services in the list. I can run that again and say, okay, but this time I want to let's take the first 15. No, it's ordered by name. But again, that varies. So it won't always be ordered by the name. Sometimes it'll be ordered by some kind of ordinal or something. So instead, let's take the first 15, and by the way, skip the first 3. I don't know, right? But once I've sort of isolated what it is I'm looking at, maybe I want to look at it a different way. So I want to see those 15, but I want to see, we'll do a format table. I want to see them formatted as a table, except I want to see the name and whether they can stop and whether they can start, right? So again, I'm sort of building this pipeline, right? And again, it's this idea of having a conversation with the shell. I'm going in and saying, give me this thing. No, that's not it. Add this predicate to it so I can limit what I'm looking at. Okay, yeah, that looks right. Now I need to see it this way, or now I need to send it here. And this is how the IT pros who use the shell on a regular basis, this is how they do it, right? They just go in, they just start typing, like, yeah, that looks right. Let's take the next step. Yeah, that looks right. Let's take the next step. And again, here, format table, I'm just saying I want to see whatever's passing through, which is the first 15 or the first 18 services minus the very first 3, and I want to see them formatted as a table with those properties. And so there we have the name, whether or not they can stop, and apparently there's no can start because I wasn't paying attention. Yeah, there's no can start, can shut down. Yeah, so something like that, right? Okay, and I said these can get arbitrarily complex, right? So now that we have that, let's say I need to send that in an email to my boss or something. I can pipe that to the clipboard. Just pipe it to clip. Yep. Well, yeah, you can save it to a file. Let's do that. So we'll do out file, and we'll save it to services.txt. Right, and then I'm going to use this command invoke item. What do you think that does? What does to invoke something mean? Start. Yeah, invoke item is the equivalent to start. If you type start and then something. So I'm going to invoke item, the services.txt file. And there it is, right? So I can send that to my boss. But this is what it's like, right? So you're just interacting with the shell, having a conversation, slowly building up the command to do what you need it to do. Another dirty trick that I want to show you, since that is the way that I interact with, and I'm assuming that if you actually go start using it, you will as well. There's this Git History command, which is incredibly useful. It actually shows you everything you've done up to this point inside of the shell. So this is like your .history file in Bash, but it's only in memory. So as soon as you close the shell, it goes away. So if you want to save something, like if the information is valuable, and you're like, oh, I really need to save that to a script, but I don't want to type it all out again. You can use Git History to actually go find the command that you executed and capture it to the clipboard or put it in a file or something. Right. That's a good question. Bang, let's see, 15? No. Yeah, so it's pound. Or bang, yeah. No, it is bang. Let's see, bang 2. Yeah, so that works. I didn't know that works, actually. I just learned something. That's awesome. So what Tim's saying here, if you look at the IDs here on the side, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 16. So each of those commands are numbered. I can type the bang character or the pound. What is that? That's pound. I can type pound and then the number of the command that I wanted to execute. And then if I hit tab, it'll actually replace that with the command that I executed. So again, I just learned something today. That's awesome. All right. So here's the deal, right? Any questions at this point? Yeah. 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 So the question is, how is this scoped? And the short answer is everything I've shown you right here has been running on my local machine. So I've been typing into a console on my local machine. It's been running locally. The results are returned locally. The rest of the evening is about how to do this across machine boundaries. So if you're familiar with SSH, yeah. So the remoting is sort of the equivalent to SSH. It's not as cool. It's not as easy to use, but it is the equivalent. Any other questions before we move on? Nope. All right. All right. So, all right. I want to talk a little bit more about the difference between remoting and web access. So we're going to start by talking about remoting. They're very similar technologies, but it's important to understand the differences because web access is built completely on top of remoting with a little extra cruft added in. They're both secure. You can use them both in non-secure ways as well, but by default they're packaged up as secure protocols. If you use remoting, you're actually going shell to shell. So you are, like I'm going to show you this here in a second, you are actually executing commands as if you had a window open on a remote machine. Whereas with web access, you're actually looking inside of a browser, and it's sort of like an emulated console experience. Remoting is fan out. You can actually execute a single command against any number of machines, and it'll just fan it out and collect the results for you. Very handy. Web access doesn't work that way. It's point to point. So if you want to use web access, you are literally executing against one machine at a time. And this one always kills me. The ports for remoting, 5986, 5985. The former is for SSL connections, and the latter is for unsecured connections. The reason I say that kills me is because I do all my demos on an Azure server, and I keep forgetting to open the right ports. They keep forgetting to set up the right endpoints, and so then it fails, and I don't know why. Which, again, that's going to be the theme tonight, is when things fail, you're not going to know why. And then web access is your standard SSL port, 443. So how does remoting work, right? So like I mentioned, we have a client and we have a server. And the idea here is that you're going to type stuff in the client, but it's not going to run on the client. It's going to run on the server. And the way that that happens is this intermediary protocol that's sitting between the two called WinRM. Is anybody familiar? Anybody heard of WinRM? Or a couple of you? Yeah, so WinRM is very lightweight remote management protocol. And quite literally what happens is you type in a command in the client, like get child item, which is another word for the dir command or the ls command. They all do the same thing. So you say get child item, and WinRM literally shuttles that command up to the server and says get child item on the server, at which point the results are obtained on the server, and then they're shuttled back to the client, right? And that's where they're displayed. And to clarify a little bit here, because I've done this talk a few times, like I've got two windows here, one on the client, one on the server. There's really no window on the server. Right? It doesn't, like a window doesn't open up and no one can see what you're typing. That's not the way it works. It's just sort of an in-memory thing on the server that's executing your script and returning the results back to you. So just wanted to clarify that. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a server. I'm using the client-server terminology here as being the client is connecting to the server and the server is executing code and returning it to the client. All right, any other questions about that? Nope. All right, so the first thing I'm going to show you, and again, hopefully this won't be too terribly frustrating, is how to set up PowerShell remoting, right? Because it doesn't typically just work out of the box. There's just a couple of steps. We'll go through them one at a time. The first here is to enable remoting on the remote server. So I have, of course you can't see it. All right. So this actually is an Azure instance that I have open up. It's a Server 2012 instance, Server 2012 R2. And the name of the machine is not taken because I kept trying to find names that were not taken on Azure, and not taken was the first one I could come up with that wasn't taken. So, what? Well, yeah. So he's got a good point. So. Right. What he's saying is that remoting is already enabled on Server 2012, and that's true. The point is that's the only place it's enabled. So I've disabled it on the server as I walked in here so that I could show you how to actually enable it. Get this fitting inside of the screen. All right. Okay, so what we're doing right now, this is not remoting, this is just RDP. This is remote desktop. I've opened up PowerShell on the server, which again is what you have to do to get remoting working. This is the first step. So I go in here, and there's actually a command, enable PS remoting. That's it. There's no parameters, and there are, but you don't have to specify them. When you do that, it's going to come back and it's going to prompt you on a bunch of things. Do you really want to do this? I'm going to save you the trouble of looking at all of them. I'm just going to say, yes, I do. And it's going to run through, and it's going to set up the WinRM service. It's going to open ports of the firewall, those two ports, 5986, 5985. And it's going to set up the ACLs for remote access, right? So it does all those things for you. And again, if you want to know what it does, you can go to MSDN. It's got a really good documentation list of what actually enable PS remoting is doing to your machines. But like I said, if you're using 2012, you don't have to worry about it. If you're using anything else, you have to take the step anywhere that you want to run remote commands, right? So set up PS remoting, and at this point, the server should be ready to go. All right, so the second step is to configure the remoting security on the local client. All right, so here, let's open you back up. All right, and that's typically, by the way, any operation you're doing here in terms of this type of configuration, you're going to have to be elevated. You're going to have to be in an elevated shell. All right, so this gets kind of weird. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you. There's a drive that only exists in PowerShell called WSMan, right? And I'm going to CD into that drive, and I'm going to dir, and I'm going to look around. There's one folder named localhost. I'm going to CD into there and look around. This actually isn't a drive. These aren't folders. These are actually the configuration settings for the Windows Security Manager. And this is a feature in PowerShell called the provider. You can take any kind of hierarchical data, and with the appropriate software intermediary, you display it like a drive. So I use this quite frequently for managing like databases and data inside of databases, and for a different type of automation tasks. But so the same commands I'm using for files, dir, cd, are working here to help me spelunk the settings that are available inside of the Windows security system. So here I'm CD'd into the security settings for localhost. There's one container I'm interested in, and that is called client, which is located right there. So I'm going to CD into the client. And if I look in there, there's a setting called trusted hosts. So typically, remoting is set up in one of two ways. Like I said, it's either secured with SSL, which implies that there's some kind of massive PKI effort at your organization, and you've got certificates and a certificate server, and you're distributing all that stuff, and it just works. I don't have that, in which case you have to fall back to this method, which is the sort of non-SSL open protocol thing where you have to set up the security on both ends. So I've enabled remoting on the server. I said it's okay for you to accept remote connections. And now if I want to connect to that server, I've got to tell my client that he's allowed to do so. So there's different ways to do this. The way I'm showing you right now isn't really the recommended way. It's the way I do it. So take it with a grain of salt. That trusted host that setting is just a list of computers that this machine is allowed to connect to. All right. So I can literally type in the individual IP addresses or the DNS names, or I can cheat, which is what I'm going to do here, and I'm going to set the value for that to the magic star, right? Which means what? Everything. Yeah. And they literally tell you, don't do this, right? Please don't do this. Are you sure you want to do it? Yes, I am. And I'm going to double check that took. Yep. So, so literally trust anyone. If I ask you to connect, please connect. And don't give me a security warning. So if I had not done that, literally the error that you get, if remoting's not working on the server, if the client isn't configured, you get the same error. And the error is access is denied, which doesn't help you at all. All right. So we've enabled remoting on the server. We're telling the server that you're allowed to accept connections. We've enabled security on the client to say you are allowed to connect to this particular machine, or in this case, any machine that I tell you to. And the next step is to create and use a remote session on the server. So move back to the C drive. All right. Okay, so there's a command that you can use to, anybody use SSH, by the way, like on a regular basis? A couple of you? Yeah, okay. So the user experience with SSH is, hey, connect there, and then it'll say, are you sure you want to do this? And they're like, yeah, I do, and then it just works, right? And that's kind of not what happens here. If you try to connect and it doesn't work, like I said, you just get the access denied error, and then you've got to go figure it out. But the equivalent to the SSH command is this thing called enter PS session. And again, I'm going to just get the help for that so we can see what it does and what the syntax is. So this will actually open up an interactive session on the remote server. So at the very basic level, I just need to specify the name of the computer. And there's lots of options here. I've configured everything with the defaults, so I don't have to specify a lot of that stuff. But if you wanted to learn more about those parameters, what would you type? Yes, git help, enter PS session dash full. Let me show you. remember, git help, the name of the command, which is enter PS session in this case, and then dash full, which shows you just the whole mess of help. Oh, I misspelled it. That's it. So, okay, here's the funny thing, right? I'm a PowerShell MVP. This is the first thing I open, the last thing I close. I use it all the time. And I'm like the worst typist you'll ever meet in your life. So I'm sure you've picked up on that by now. No, it's all the time, dude. I can promise you that. So yeah, so like there's a use SSL command or use SSL parameter, and again, if we wanted to learn what those things do, we can just ask help. Excuse me, the woes of approaching autumn. So yeah, we can just ask help for that information if we want to know what those things do. Right? But we don't need to use those. So I'm just going to use the enter PS session, and I'm going to specify a computer name, and the name is nottaken.cloudapp.net. Since I'm not using SSL, I have to specify credentials, and the credential I'm going to specify is my username, which is bfarino. Actually, and so it'll come back and prompt me for the password, which I will dutifully type in. All right. So you notice nothing's returned, right? But check out the prompt. You'll notice that it's been changed, right? So there's actually been a prefix added to it now. It's like letting me know that that prompt is now actually running on nottaken.cloudapp.net and not locally. And you'll notice that the actual current location has changed too. So on my local machine, my username is Jim. On the server, my username is bfarino. So the path is reflecting that. And if I actually look at some of the environment, so let's do computer name, right? If I look at the environment, the computer name is not taken. Because if I looked at that locally, it would be Roth, I think is the name of this machine. So I'm on the server at this point. I'm actually running things on the server. And again, we'll go ahead and beat the dead horse. Just to prove the point, I'll go ahead and get a list of those files, and I'll dump them out into a file. We'll call it local files.txt. All right, where does that file live? On the server, right? So let's go into our Azure instance, and we'll open up Windows Explorer. And I'll go into the Documents folder, and there's local files, right, which I just created a few moments ago. Right. So I am, at this point, interacting with the server, and I'm able to do things on the server. And I can do whatever I want here, right? So like, remember that list of stuff that I showed you before, that list of commands that are available on my local machine? And I said, oh, yeah, there's Active Directory stuff and Exchange stuff and Windows stuff and Azure stuff and whatever. Well, let me ask you, right, how do I get the list of things I can do on the server? All right, so I'm asking the server, what commands do you have available? Right. And it returns a big, long list. We should probably pick something. Let's try. Well, here let's stick with the with what we know. So let's type git service w3 svc. Or let's just do git service and see what comes back. So this is a list of services that are running where? On the server. Yep. So w3 svc is not installed at this point. But this is what I mean. So I'm actually now interacting with the server. Here's another fun one, right? Git. I just found this one recently. Git Windows feature. So like when you go to a server and you need to install certain Windows features or roles to get things working, like I don't know, IIS, right, or Active Directory, or the DHCP server. That's what this list is. This is a list of the features that are available and which ones are installed. So it's got this nice tree display over there on the left. Let's find something innocuous that we can set up. I'm sorry, what was that? Oh, the print LBD service? Wait, what does that do before I actually run that? Oh, okay, yeah, that's useful. All right, so if I want to install a Windows feature, what do you think I do? What's that? Maybe install? And it's already popping up the answer for me, right? Oh, what do you want to do? I want to install a Windows feature. And I don't remember the name of it. So it was... I hate this computer. Oh, I'm sorry, I hate the trackpad on this computer. There it is. So these names over here, this is what I need. The print LPD service. So I'm just going to copy that. So install Windows feature, print LPD service. I'm going to enter, and it's going to do that for me, right? So this is interactive, right? But I can obviously save this into a script and run it when I need to. I can point it to that server and run it there, or I can point it to that server and run it there. So you can kind of imagine how nice it would be to say, okay, well, we need a web server, and it has to be set up a certain way, right? We need that flavor of web server to just be able to capture that inside of a script, and then point it at the machine that you want it to run on, and just have it work, right? And that's the idea here. There it goes. And so go back to Get Windows Feature. And there are too many Windows features. There it is. Yeah, so now it's enabled. The LPD service is enabled. Right, so I can do that all day. Right, I can install software. I can install Windows features, remove them, add users, remove users, set up Active Directory, manage SharePoint, Exchange, whatever. All from the console, all from script, remotely from my recliner in my basement. I'm just kidding. I don't. All right. There's another usage scenario that I wanted to talk to you about. Yeah, absolutely. You guys want to take a break? Okay. What time is it? 7:29? Okay. It's like a glue technology. It's something there to make your life easier. It's not the thing that you're supposed to know, right? Again, it's the thing that you're supposed to know how to use, and you're supposed to know how to figure things out in it. But don't be an expert in it because it's not going to buy you anything. Be an expert in Active Directory, or Exchange, or SharePoint, or server administration, or something, and then know just enough PowerShell to get your job done, and you'll be really valuable. Okay. So don't get the impression that you should be an expert. You really just want like that merit badge is worthless. You want the just enough to get by merit badge. That's the merit badge you want. All right. So we just did an interactive session on the server. There's another way that you can use remoting that's actually very powerful. So again, we had the point-to-point from my local machine to the server. What I can do is fan that out. There's a command called invoke command. And remember, invoke means to do the thing, right? So invoke command means execute the command. And if I look at the help for this command, one of the things that is available here is a list of computer names. Right? And there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. But what I want to show you is like if you have, here's the deal, man. So like if you have 15 servers, that's not a big deal, right? You can manage those with Server Manager. That's not a big deal. If you have 1,500 servers and they all have to be identical, do you want to do that in the GUI? No, right? I mean, it's job security. You're never going to be done, you know? Right? But that's why this exists, right? That's why this exists. So you can do something like this. You can say invoke command, and I want to run this on the computer name not taken .cloudapp.net.
and I'm going to execute a script block. And again, a script block, it's just PowerShell's way of saying, here's a chunk of code. Right? Here's a chunk of script that I want to run over there on that server. And I'm going to do something really stupid, dir. Let's see if that works. Dun, dun, dun. Access is denied. Oh, because I didn't specify the credential. So again, remember before I did the interactive session and I signed in and then I said, okay, now you're on the server. Well, now I'm just saying, here's a command. Go to that server and run it. Right, and the results, the command executes it there and the results come back to me. The thing is that computer name parameter it could actually be a list. Right? I specified one machine name. I could specify 1,500 machines. And PowerShell will be like, yeah, dude, I can do that. I'll see in a little bit. And it'll go off and run the command on every machine, collect all the results, drop them back to me as they show up. So the question is the list a text file or whatever? Quite literally, in its most basic form, it would look something like this, like the name of that computer. I think there's another one called nottakenfiles.cloudapp.net. And I don't know if this is going to work, by the way, so don't fault me if this fails. I don't think I have remoting set up on that second machine. Yeah, no, I don't. But you could just literally list them all individually. You could list them in a file and load them into a variable. However you want to do it, right? That's just the issue. The point is that it gives you that access point to say, here's the list of machines. Go do the thing on those machines. Yep. Yep. Yeah, so the question is, I have to type in my credential every time. There's a couple of different ways to do that. So again, it's the shell. I wonder if there's any commands that we can use to get credentials. See the puzzled look on my face? You guys, I swear. So there's this command, get credential, and I specify a username. It'll ask me for a password, and I'll just type something in. It actually returns an object to me, so I can actually save that. I'll save that in a variable C. All right, so now I have this variable C that actually contains the credentials that I typed in. Right? And it's secure. It's encrypted. I can't read it. It's not that secure. But now if I want to run that command again, where is it? There it is. Instead of typing in bfarino, I can just reference variable C. And it'll just use that against the server, and it'll work. All right. So that's how that happens, right? So typically, like if you have a script that you want to run against 1,500 machines, ideally you would be in some kind of domain environment where you would have central authentication authority using Kerberos or something. So the credentials would only have to be passed in once, and the ticket would just bounce from machine to machine. That's not always the case. Again, my company doesn't do things in a very fancy way, so we don't use domains that often. So I usually have to do it like this. I just get the credentials once in a variable, and I just send it every time over the wire. Yeah, Tim? Okay, yeah, so the question is there any kind of key store that would preserve your password entries across sessions? The answer is there is something like that in Windows. It's not percolated through PowerShell. And they're reluctant to do it because they don't want administrators being lazy about it. So on the one hand, you have a secure store for your passwords, which is not lazy. Putting the password in files, which I see people do all the time, is lazy. So I would rather have the password store accessible through PowerShell. Okay. Any other questions? Going once? Going twice? Nope. All right. All right, I want to talk about web access. So we talked about remoting. You saw how it works. That's the basis for web access. So web access is basically, it's a really kind of clumsy solution to security issues, right? So in this case, we have a set of machines that we want to manage, right? But they're in the militarized zone, let's say, right? We don't want to expose them to the public, but we have one machine here that is web accessible, and that is the machine upon which we are going to allow people to connect. But we don't want to open up non-standard ports because, again, this is the militarized zone, so we would just want to open standard SSL ports and HTTP ports. So that's where PowerShell Web Access comes in. The idea here is that you have a user using an internet console, like Chrome or something, and they're connecting to this demilitarized machine here over a standard SSL port, just using a website. And from there, they are able to use remoting to manage the rest of the machines that are inside of the organization's network. Right. So the implication here, all the stuff we learned about remoting comes into play here. And so we have all the bulk of PowerShell and remoting. And then on top of that, so the remoting, again, is working between this DMZ computer and the computers in the organization. We also have the overhead of having IIS involved now. So you're bringing all that stuff with you if you want to use this type of technology. So it's but again, it's not that big of a deal. I make it sound like it's hard to set up. It's really not. So let's talk about what it takes to set it up. So the first thing that we need to do is to install the web access feature on the server that is going to act as that demilitarized access point. All right. Just checking. All right, so I'm on my server again. Again, I'm coming through RDP. I could use remoting for this if I wanted to. All right. Nope, that's way too small. There it is. Okay. Tell you how often I do this. I don't remember what it is. Okay, so I went ahead and saved these commands inside of a script file, so I didn't have to remember what they are. I'm going to go ahead and type them out for you, though. So it's a three-step process. Again, the first step is to install the Windows feature. And again, the command there, we've already seen it. We used it to install. There it goes. We used it to install the Unix printer features. Thank you, Alan, for that. So again, I just want to install a Windows feature, and the name of the feature is Windows PowerShell Access. If you wanted to know what name to use, you just run get Windows feature, and it lists them all for you. Right? We've already seen that. So I'm going to install Windows feature. There's a bunch of options I can specify here. The one that I'm going to include is called Include Management Tools, and that's kind of a catch-all. Have you ever installed IIS without installing the management tools? It's very useless. There's nothing you can do with it, really. So again, this will install the feature as well as all the dependent features. In this case, that's a whole bunch of stuff like IIS and .NET, as well as the management tools that are necessary to run this thing in the GUI. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. And again, it's going to error out because why? Argument not valid. Oh, you know what? I bet I did. Well, let's figure out what that is. Get Windows feature. PowerShell. All right, there's Windows PowerShell Web Access. Windows PowerShell Web Access. So I'm lazy. I'm just going to copy that. All right, so there it goes. So it's just setting up that Windows feature for me. And again, they packaged it up this way to keep it simple. So just to give you an idea of what's happening right now, it's installing IIS, it's setting up the web service or the web server, opening the ports, doing all that stuff that you would have to do as an administrator by hand if this command was not available. So while that's going, there it goes. All right, so it's done. Let's look at the next step. So the next step, we've set up the Windows feature. So IIS is now there. The web server is up and running. We need to install what's called the Web Access Gateway. That is a fancy term for a web application that has a very specific purpose, which we'll look at in a second. And the way that we do that, again, it's just a command. And then you can see it right up there. Install PWSA web application. Right. There's a bunch of options here. Typically, you don't need to worry about it unless you've got other things installed on the web service that might have a name conflict. So I'm just going to run it. It sets up the application pool, it sets up the bindings, all the IIS type thingies that have to happen to get that thing up and running just work. Right, it just happens. So that's set up. The third step, and this is probably the most confusing, so I'm going to do it again the simple way, is setting up the authorization. So we have IIS set up, we have the web application set up, and now we have to go tell this layer of technology who's allowed to access what. And the way that we do that is by pairing users to specific computers inside of the militarized zone. Which again, I'm not really interested in setting those things up individually. So what I've done, and again, the command there is add PSWA authorization rule. What I'm going to do is just set up my local user here, Beefarino, and let him know that I want him to be able to access anything. Right? Again, with that star, the magical star, I want to access anything. Oh, and also the configuration name, anything. So again, there's three things here: the username, the computer name, and the configuration name. Not really clear what configuration name is yet because I always just set it to star because I don't want to mess with it. But I have a feeling like if you have tiered users that you want specified access to, that's the way that you do that. All right, so I set up the access rule, and then once that's done, everything should, in theory, be ready to go. So I'm back on my local machine here. Close everything down. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up Chrome. And I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to go to not taken, cloudapp.net. So the web address, http:// not taken at cloudapp.net, PSWA is the default application name. And it's going to give me a warning here. Chrome's going to complain. Oh, never mind. So I have a test certificate installed, and apparently I've already accepted it. Oh, no. Yes. Let's try that. There we go. So I have a test certificate set up on the server. I don't have a real live certificate from a trusted authority, so Chrome is complaining. And what I'm doing right now is just saying, please stop complaining. I know what I'm doing. I've been here before. So this is that website, that web application that we installed with that PowerShell command. This is what it looks like. And it's asking us for credentials, saying, who are you and what do you want to access? So I'm going to use my local account, the Beefarino account that I set up the authorization rules for. And it's asking me, who do you want to connect to? Right? So right here I have a computer name or a connection URI. In this case, I want to connect to the local machine, not taken. So I'm going to type in that computer name. And there's a lot of other options here too. I'm not going to go into detail about them, but these all affect specific connection properties for the remoting channel that this opens up. But I'm going to go ahead and sign in just so you can see what this looks like. Let's see. There we go. Again, your mileage may vary. So, I'm sorry? Yes. That is accurate. Yes, that is, that's the bottom line. All right, this is what it looks like. So this looks like a console, right? It looks like the console we've been using the whole time, but it's actually embedded inside of the web page. You can actually come in here and actually like view the source, and if you want to look at a bunch of HTML and stuff, have a good time. But it's meant to operate just like a console, so it's really hard to read. But if I type a command in here like dir, it's like I'm using the console on the server at this point. Again, this is now a point-to-point connection. I've connected from the local machine to a single computer in my militarized zone through that web access gateway. All right, and that's what this is for. It's just for that one point-to-point thing, and now that I'm there, maybe I can fan out to the rest of the machines in the network. I don't know. It's just sort of a way to tunnel in there through the DMZ into the actual secure network in the back end. So anything that I can do on the normal console, I can in theory do here. If I need help, I can type get help, and it'll come back and show me help. I can get the list of Windows features that are installed if I type it correctly. Right. So the user experience is identical in almost every way. So that's web access, basically. It's just a sort of a really cheap web front end to that remoting stuff we already talked about, which, again, is just a way to shuttle commands from your local machine to some other machine and run them as if you were running them locally. So, yeah, Alan? Yes. Yeah, I thought I mentioned that a couple times, but the if you go here, yeah, so the actual connection between the web gateway that we're typing things into and the server that's backing that, the connection between that server and the demilitarized zone and the rest of the network is done through remoting. So whatever firewalls exist between there have to have those ports open. But the remoting ports don't have to be open between the server and the internet, which can be problematic. Yeah, the IIS server just has to have the port 443 open for SSL connections over the web. That's basically all there is to web access. It's not very exciting. And honestly, you don't see people using it very much. This UI is horrible. I mean, things work in here, like tab completion works. It's not great. I mean, it is kind of nice because you can come in here and run DOS commands too, like ipconfig or what have you. But it's very cumbersome to use. The idea behind this was really that, you remember that bring your own device thing that Microsoft kept talking about? The idea here was that you could use this on any device that supports the web. But the problem is PowerShell has so many weird characters in it, like $signs and @ and curly brackets, that are really hard to access through mobile device keyboards. That this is practically unusable. Like I can't even reference a variable on my phone without going through like 5 keyboard screens to get to that $sign. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's great for PC access. But when they tout it, all I'm saying, like when they tout it, they're touting it for the Bring Your Own Device manifesto. We've actually asked them to have like a keyboard or just some kind of set of weird keys, like the pipe key. You can never find that on your phone. Just right down here, just so you can click on them and put them in there at the same time. Any other questions? Nope. All right. So we talked about setup. So here are the limitations, right? And these limitations are really for remoting. And they apply to web access by proxy. And what is SCP in Linux? What is the SCP command? Secure copy. And what does it do? Yeah. Yeah. So you open up on Linux. You open up an SSH connection. It just works. And you say, oh, I have a file here on my client that I want over there on the server. So you use SCP, and the file goes over there, right? And then it's there, and you can run it if it's a script, or install it if it's a Python, whatever it is, you know. PowerShell and WinRM and remoting don't have any equivalent to that, and it's really annoying. So the beauty about SCP is once you connect from one machine to another, you don't have to remember what machine you're connected to. You just have to know that file's there. I want it there, right? That's what I want inside of PowerShell. That would be extremely useful. Because if I save things as scripts, or if I have modules or whatever it is, large chunks of file data that I need to transfer over to a server, I have no way of doing that without knowing exactly what server I'm connected to, and I don't always do that. So that scenario where you have 1,500 computers that you're trying to manage, that scenario works really well if you don't have to copy anything over there. if you're trying to get a file on in the same place on all of those machines, this isn't going to help you very much. Correct. You can, yeah, if you have a shared network resource, and that's the way people typically handle that. Which brings me to the second issue. Yeah. There is now. That's kind of a rabbit hole. It's only available in PowerShell 5, which isn't really available yet, right? But it's coming. Yeah. The SCP thing? No, we've asked them for that. The MVPs have that's like our biggest want ever since remoting came out. It's like, well, how do we get a file? And they're like, just open up a network share. Like, that's not what I want to do, but thank you. So, the issue of having like a network share somewhere that you just drop files, it's a great idea and it works really well. But again, the Windows security model is it's kind of broken when you get down to that level. So here's the problem, right? I'm logged into my local machine as somebody. When I connect to another remote machine using those credentials, I am now passing those credentials on, and I'm delegating, right? And at some point, that breaks down. The problem with PowerShell is typically in these remoting scenarios, I'm not in the same environment on my client that I am with my servers. So I'm either separated outside of the domain, outside of the VPN, whatever it is. My security tokens are not going to transfer over. And so that Windows security model of here's your Kerberos ticket, and now you can ride wherever you want to ride doesn't work very well. So they've actually implemented another security protocol, I use the term loosely, inside of the PowerShell remoting thing called CRED SSP. I swear, transmits your credentials in plain text. So enjoy. Don't use it, I guess is what I'm saying. All right, so I brought 2 books that I want to give away. I know you guys usually do raffles, but today's a special day. Does anyone know what today is? Thanks. All right, so so this is Ada Lovelace, which answers the first question. All right, so I'll have to come up with a second question. All right, so Alan, you shouted that out right now, didn't you? Yeah, okay, so you be quiet now. Who is this? Who is Ada Lovelace? Yes, that's actually a very good answer. Lord Byron's daughter, right? Sometimes considered what? Yeah. Basically, I can thank this woman for my entire career. She was the first person. She worked with a guy named C.S. Babbage on something. He was building a computer that would physically solve a problem, and she was saying, "Well, what if we could program it? Right? What if we could specify the logic in a really indirect way?" So today is Ada Lovelace Day, right? Which is why she's in this presentation. And she's actually a very remarkable lady. If you get a chance to read a biography about her, by all means do so. So. So I still have this book to give away. Let's see. I'm gonna come up with a date. Closest birthday gets it. Closest to that date gets it. Okay. So the date I'm thinking of is May 22nd. Is that anyone's birthday? Anyone's birthday around May 22nd? June 6th. The 24th of May? Anybody closer? No? All right. Congratulations. All right. So that's it. Thanks for coming. If you guys are interested in PowerShell and you want to learn more, I highly recommend the user group. Anybody who actually comes to the user group will tell you that it's a great time. Yeah. So we've been running events called Powershell Saturday which if you're familiar with the SQL Saturday, it's kind of a thing. It's an all-day PowerShell thing. We bring in experts from all over the world. We're not doing that next year. We're actually the PowerShell Summit. So the PowerShell team, Jeff Snover, the architect for Windows Server, Ken Hansen, who's a PM on the Windows Server team, they're going to be in the Charlotte office talking about PowerShell. And we had the summit in Redmond earlier this year. We had people coming from Australia and Belgium and Amsterdam, Sweden, just to share their knowledge. So it's a great time. It's very intense couple of days, but you'll learn a lot. You'll walk away with a lot of great knowledge. So that's coming up next April. So PowerShell.org if you want to follow up on that. Yep. Thank you guys for having me.